Welcome back to the Luden Lobby podcast. I'm Ryan McMagan, editor-in-chief at the Mises Institute. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure and check us out online at Mises.org. That's Mises.org. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled this week that the 20th century interpretation of so-called birthright citizenship, that is the idea that virtually anyone born inside the territory of the United States is an automatic citizen, is to be upheld. This further solidifies into U.S. law the idea that children born on U.S. soil to visiting foreign nationals, among many other non-citizens, are granted citizenship automatically. Those who think that this decision will somehow settle anything politically, however, are mistaken. Indeed, this decision, as with birthright citizenship in general, will increase political conflict over the presence of foreign nationals, both legal and illegal, within the United States. This is because birthright citizenship takes two separate phenomena, immigration and citizenship/naturalization, and fuses them together. By combining the two, the imposition of birthright citizenship takes foreign nationals who may be in the United States for totally non-political economic reasons, such as employment, and potentially turns those foreign nationals into political actors. That is, the granting of citizenship turns private, non-political persons into participants in U.S. political institutions. This is because the granting of citizenship is not primarily about legal residency or access to the legal system. It is not necessary to be a citizen, after all, to reside legally in the United States, or to file lawsuits or to defend oneself in court. That can all be done through means other than citizenship. And it is already well established, by the way, that in the Bill of Rights, general legal rights, your usual legal protections apply to persons and not simply to citizens. And this is clear in the text of the Bill of Rights itself. Nowhere does the Bill of Rights mention citizens. It mentions individuals, it mentions persons, it mentions residents. Those sorts of words are what is used. And this, of course, checks out with the ideology of the time, the idea that we're dealing here with universal rights that apply to everyone and not just to those who have citizenship in the country. So given that citizenship is not synonymous with having your rights recognized, we can see that in modern times, citizenship is really about the legal prerogative to participate in politics. In modern America and in most democratic states, citizenship is about voting now. In other times and places, it meant other things. But now, virtually everywhere, especially in the West, when we're talking about citizenship, we're talking about voting and also holding political office, which is just another manifestation of participation in the electoral political process. You could, of course, engage in other types of politics, demonstrations, free speech, publishing tracts, those sort of things that many Americans have used over centuries to participate in the legal process. But we're talking here about voting, which is supposed to be connected specifically to citizenship. Contrary to what some self-proclaimed libertarians might say, support for private property rights does not require support of the widespread granting of voting rights/citizenship. After all, citizenship is not any sort of natural right at all, as it does not stem from property ownership or self-ownership. Unlike private property, citizenship as a concept does not exist outside state institutions. One cannot homestead citizenship or privately contract for citizenship. You don't find citizenship out in the wilderness. It's not something that exists in the state of nature. When we think about all of the philosophical ideals underlying the idea of private property and the idea of liberalism as we think of it today, citizenship simply isn't fundamental to that. Certainly not the modern idea of it, which ties citizenship specifically to voting. So the right to citizenship is very much unlike, say, a right to own a gun or a right to be secure in one's papers. Both of these are simply rights to purchase, own, and control one's property. Similarly, you might note that, right, the right to freedom of speech, the right to practice one's religion, these all stem from self-ownership, right? Your physical ownership of yourself and your ability to do things with your body, right? To speak things, to go places, to interact with other groups. All of those First Amendment rights very much involved with self-ownership. And again, citizenship, the right to vote, this is something totally separate. That's not the same concept at all. Nonetheless, some libertarians have made some anemic and unconvincing attempts to claim that citizenship, again, just means the right to vote in this context, is inseparable from one's position on immigration. So if you're against ICE rounding up a bunch of non-violent people minding their own business, then you must be in favor of those people being able to vote, to get citizenship very quickly, and that all their children, even if those people are, say, on welfare, even if they contribute nothing to the community, even if they just arrived, that their children should just get automatic citizenship. And this stems somewhat from this claim that citizenship is a critical procedural legal prerogative because voting supposedly is a tool for the protection of property rights, at least in this view. This is an empirical claim that you being able to vote somehow translates into you having your property rights protected. There is, however, no evidence whatsoever that this empirical claim is true. If we were to look at the historical record, if anything, the expansion of the franchise has led to immense growth in the size and scope of government. And at least it hasn't served to stop it. I suppose it would be difficult to prove causation in this case, but certainly voting doesn't prevent governments from becoming huge and abusive. And so the state's ability to steal property and violate property rights at will has happened alongside of an expanding franchise. So the idea that a single citizen's vote out of, say, the 150 million votes cast in a national election will somehow protect that voter's property rights. So you get this immigrant comes here, they can't vote, so now their property rights are violated. But if they can vote, their property rights aren't violated. This rests on basically pro-democracy propaganda and metaphysics and imaginary thinking. And this is partly why most 18th century classical liberals and those who came even before, like John Locke, the levelers who were populists, they adhered to the idea that voting needs to come alongside some sort of integration into the community, a certain level of productivity within the economy. They understood, as you can see in the early U.S. Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, and certainly an opinion held by many of the early American founders, was that, right, vagabonds, criminals, people who contributed nothing to the community, and certainly brand new aliens as well, were not considered ripe for immediate citizenship. This was just simply common sense as regarded by them, and so many of them opposed the idea of universal suffrage. Now, widespread suffrage has never been shown to increase freedom or lessen state power. It's an administrative act of states. It has nothing to do with anything we call laissez-faire, that's for sure, right? The idea that government should be small and weak, not violate your property, just leave you alone, let you be unregulated. In reality, the spread of the idea of citizenship is more closely associated with state building. That is the opposite of laissez-faire. That if we look into the historical record, we see that modern notions of national citizenship come from efforts by states to assert control over their populations by claiming some sort of ownership through citizenship. It's also been a matter of by claiming citizenship from the central government. This helps subvert then local types of citizenship that might feed into attempts at decentralizing and weakening the central state's power. So citizenship has actually been a very important tool for governments to build themselves and assert more control from the center. So rather than join together the issues of immigration and citizenship, we should keep in mind that it is entirely possible to be generally laissez-faire toward immigration. That is the idea that, sure, leave people alone for the most part, right? They come here, they do business, they're not on welfare. Then you could leave those people alone. But you could also say, well, it's not a great idea to engage in this promiscuous granting of citizenship, that anybody just happens to show up, gets to be a citizen within just a few years. Historically, that has been viewed with a lot of trepidation for good reason. Now, when we consider this great difference between immigration and citizenship, it's clear that if we wish to simply respect the basic property rights of travelers, workers, and other foreign nationals within the United States, it is just not necessary, either legally, logically, or conceptually, that every person who visits or resides within the United States for a time be granted the legal prerogative to vote. It is not necessary to have access to the ballot box in order for such persons virtually all of whom are foreign nationals who already have citizenship somewhere else, it's not necessary to give them access to the ballot box for those people to hold a job, live in peace with their family, or own property. And the same is true for their children, most of whom will become citizens via the jus sanguinis principle. That is, you become citizens where your parents are citizens and not just in the territory where you happen to be born. And so it's not like these people are stateless, right? That's a whole other topic in itself, the idea that you're born somewhere, you become stateless. We're not talking about stateless people here. We're talking about the idea that just simply based on territory, you are automatically given the right to vote within a particular territory once you come of age, right? There is a reason why this is very rare in the world. It is only in countries that have very long-standing labor shortages in the earlier years of these states. So we're talking about how during the 18th and 19th centuries, it was mostly in the Americas where you had a whole lot of labor shortage. And so they were constantly looking to attract more people to the governments. This is also why they imported slaves, was so that they could take more advantage of the resources in the New World. Outside the New World, though, where there weren't these long-standing labor shortages, you don't see, except for a very few rare instances, you simply don't see birthright citizenship. In contrast to the scheme for expanding ever more citizenship to foreign nationals, it would be more prudent to adopt a legal environment where the granting of citizenship is relatively rare and limited to longtime taxpayers and residents with quote-unquote skin in the game and to their family members. This more prudent position is likely to diffuse much of the more vociferous opposition to immigration itself. After all, most people are accepting of the idea that it is not a problem to grant citizenship to a 20-year resident who is economically self-supporting, is not a drain on taxpayer funds, is integrated into the community. After all, many of us peacefully engage with such people as business associates and community members, sometimes even family members, on a regular basis, and few people regard such people as a problem. The alternative to this gradual and fiscally conservative approach is to grant citizenship, i.e. voting rights, to persons who may have only the most superficial attachment to any community within the United States. The modern application of citizenship laws, especially in the form of birthright citizenship, means there are few legal impediments to granting voting rights to foreign nationals who are drains on the public fisc, who are only temporarily domiciled within the U.S. or otherwise not contributing to the polities in which they live. This is especially an issue, too, in the modern age of dual or triple citizenship, right? Which really prior to the 60s wasn't nearly as widespread. But now what you got are a lot of these people being granted automatic citizenship and their parents and the children, and a lot of people granted citizenship today through naturalization. They remain citizens of other states and participate in those other states' political institutions. And it's hard to see how in, say, the 18th century, they would have thought that was a good idea. The idea here then is that you're subject to the laws of the U.S., and that's why you get to be a citizen in those places. So there's a lot of debate over exactly when this would be appropriate. But in most cases, especially outside the New World, people have figured out that just simple automatic granting of citizenship, totally separate from the idea of simply respecting those people's property rights and their personal integrity, presents some significant problems. And one can draw upon countless cases of foreign nationals, of course, abusing the birthright citizenship regime to exploit U.S. net taxpayers. The case of Chinese birth tourism is just one example, and that's been getting a lot of press lately. Indeed, in many cases, the implications of unrestricted birthright citizenship are so absurd that Justice Clarence Thomas pointed out this week in his 91-page dissent to the Supreme Court majority's ruling that under the birthright citizenship doctrine, the U.S. could not even deny citizenship to a U.S.-born child who is raised in a foreign country, joins a foreign army, and then fights against the United States. That person would have to be recognized as a citizen and given all the benefits thereof, which strikes Thomas as a bit odd, and I would agree. This is also why historically virtually no polity or political community outside of those places with labor shortage, mostly again in the Americas, as we've noted, are contemplating this, and they've historically tied legal membership within a polity to those who are born to parents and into families that are already citizens and have well-established social or economic ties to the community. Now that the court has indefinitely guaranteed a quote-unquote right of citizenship to children of foreign nationals in the United States, this greatly raises the stakes for immigration controls that would not be nearly as attractive or deemed nearly as necessary without the courts telling us that voting rights must be made readily available to millions of babies born to foreign nationals and even raised in foreign countries. The political effect is similar to that which results from granting U.S. welfare benefits to foreign nationals. This has been apparent in increasingly prolific federal spending on alleged refugees and through the expansion of taxpayer-funded programs, free emergency health care, free government schooling, free housing for quote-unquote asylum seekers, and more. So not surprisingly, the response from many others, that is, from many of the taxpayers, has been rising opposition to immigration overall. The same has resulted from the federal government's relentless drive to grant citizenship to rising numbers of immigrants, many of whom have been legal residents for only 5 years, and many others who skim off taxpayer-funded services. Birthright citizenship can specifically be used to increase welfare spending on immigrant households. Children born in the U.S. to foreign nationals provide a legal loophole of sorts through which foreign national heads of household receive welfare dollars with the stipulation that the money be spent on the citizen children. Because you've got households where, sure, the head of household, the adults in the household are not citizens, and so therefore are excluded from several different welfare sorts of programs. But the children, because born in the U.S., are eligible, and this brings in cash flow from the taxpayers into the household. The result, of course, is that substantial amounts of taxpayer-funded benefits are doled out to foreign nationals and their households. And this then further politicizes the issue of immigration, which would be largely non-political, right? If we weren't talking about widespread granting of the right to vote and engage in these political institutions, which, of course, the native population finds troubling, and they could see how those votes could be used to exploit the net taxpayers, and also the related issue of welfare. All of that turns immigration, that is just someone coming across the border to work a job, turns that into a highly political situation. Now, unfortunately, there is no end in sight to the current federal drive to expand government spending and voting rights for foreign nationals. Birthright citizenship is an important part of this scheme because it creates an easy way for foreign nationals to execute an end run around limits on citizenship for their children, when those children are then used to access more welfare dollars and increase citizenship for family members through the anchor baby strategy. The tax burden for many of these new citizens falls on the legacy taxpayers. And many of these longtime taxpayers know they are being exploited, so they look to the only legal solution that they think is left to them, and which may be the only one left to them, which is to greatly limit immigration as a means of limiting further citizenship for foreign nationals. Because when citizenship is automatic, then suddenly it becomes a lot more important in these people's minds to simply keep people from being on U.S. soil at all, because the mere presence on U.S. soil then creates the potential for automatic citizenship for someone who may then be raised in a foreign country, for someone who may remain a foreign citizen through their parents, for someone who may have virtually no connection to the society at all. That is for people with little to no skin in the game. And, well, thanks to this week's Supreme Court ruling, the political stakes are only growing. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Luton Lobby podcast. We'll be back next time with more, so we'll see you then.